Sudden death overtime. On our first going to the overtime, you saw some great overtime goals, and now let's meet the man who gave the Islanders their first Stanley Cup in overtime. Bobby Nystrom joins Ed Westfall.
Thank you, Jigs. Only Maurice Richard has more overtime goals than Bob Nystrom, but there's a player playing in this hockey game that has 4 overtime goals as well as you. Dale Hunter. We thought he had his 5th.
I sure did, Eddie. I don't know how Glenn Healy could have possibly kept that puck out. The only thing that I could think of was that he had his stick wedged onto the post, and that really gave him the extra strength. But you talk about a guy that goes to the net, that Hunter is unbelievable.
Well, the original shot by Hunter was some stop by Healy because he seemed to be out of position on an earlier play, and then he dove across and did get his gloves in front of it. But both teams had some great scoring chances in the overtime.
They certainly did. The one that I could think of the most was the fact that Thomas got that pass across. All he had to do was just tee that one up. And you know Stevie can shoot the puck as good as anybody, especially on that cross-ice pass. And hey, listen, there's a lot of nerves going on out there. The puck just sort of trickled underneath the heel of his stick, and it was gone into the corner. But great hockey game. What a difference from the first game in the respect that they've just turned up the tempo more and more and more.
Well, we talked about the fact that the Islanders were going to have to play at least 60 minutes. We didn't realize that they were going to have to play an extra 15 minutes or 20 minutes and go to another one. But that was one of the problems they ran into in Game 1, was that they didn't play the full 60 minutes.
Absolutely right, Eddie. I think that, we had talked about it. They played well in the first period and probably halfway through the second period, and then they just seemed like they were going to try to win it with a 1-goal lead. And against Washington, with the type of firepower they have, there was just no way. Ultimately, there was a lot of scrums, and then finally Hunter just came out, and a couple of guys just were able to battle the puck in. But in general, I think that these two teams are so evenly matched, and it's going to lend itself to an exciting series.
Well, we could go back 6 years when Pat LaFontaine scored in 4 overtimes here. You were the assistant coach behind the bench. What is the philosophy of a coaching staff when it comes to overtime? Is it to play the game and to wait for an opportunity, or is it to go out and create one?
Well, I think that it's probably go out and create one. Be aggressive in that respect. The only problem against Washington is that you figure you're safe with that third man high, but they've got those defensemen that move into the play so much so that even if they've got 3 men back, they always have 4 men attacking. So it makes it pretty tough, and the Islanders have to be very careful. But in general, we were pushing the players to try to get that goal. You never want to play a defensive style game in overtime, because you're just not going to be able to come back if they score one.
I suppose at this point in a hockey game, Bob, I had mentioned just before the end of the first overtime that if as this goes on and the longer it goes, it would seem to favor the Islanders because they are a much younger hockey club.
I would say that it does, and especially on the defensive side, although the loss of Rich Pilon certainly hurts, but Al is using a lot of guys, Tommy Fitzgerald on the lineup, Loisel, guys like that, and I think that Terry is using just a little less players, and it could pay off for the Islanders in the long run.
You mentioned Tommy Fitzgerald, and he was one of the guys that with an open net and being tripped up, you had to understand he was in the air, but he had a great chance to end it.
He sure did. If he wouldn't have been airborne by the time he got to the puck, he might have possibly been able to squeak that back. But a good effort, and I really, it's such a great thrill to see the players dig down so deep. They get knocked down, they're up in a second, and when it comes to overtime, there's just no mistakes to be made out there. So these players are giving it their all.
Well, you having scored 4 overtime goals, what are some of the things that you think of, and when you were a player, when you're sitting in the dressing room right now, and the first overtime is over, what kind of things went through your mind?
Well, more than anything else, I always thought real positively. I always felt that I was going to be the guy that scored, and I had that inner feeling, and I always felt that I worked extra hard on my conditioning, and I felt that it paid off in those overtimes, and I just felt good. And I think the general attitude of the New York Islanders, whether it's passed down or whatever, we've had such a good record in overtime, and I believe that sort of continues on.
Well, I'm sure if Al Arbor knew you were standing here, he'd love to have you walking around in the dressing room right now, but I know you have to get back to your radio work, and we've got to get back to Jiggs McDonald. Thanks for the visit. Good to see you, Robert.
Thanks, 18. Anytime.
Bob Nystrom, our guest here at the end of the first overtime. Let's go back and rejoin Jiggs McDonald. Jiggs?
Yes, just to recite those numbers that Bobby touched on, this will be the 33rd overtime Stanley Cup playoff game for the New York Islanders, and their lifetime record, 25 wins and 7 losses. What'll it be after 33? There's more to come from Landover right after these words.